So fundamentally, Youth Endowment Fund is here to do a couple of things. Firstly, our vision is a world where no child is involved in violence. And then our mission is to find what works and build a movement to put the knowledge of what works into practice. That's fundamentally why we're here. So we think of us as a testing school of thought, trying to get to the bottom of actually what does work for children. And that's our primary goal. And our main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And the main thing is children and young people. 2030, when we're due to finish this work, we would hope that we can look at young people and say, hey, these are the things that work for you. And that's part of the pedagogy around here. So let me quickly share my screen before I bring in our first presenter. Just wanted to let you know a couple of things. The first thing is that the toolkit. The toolkit is the Witch Guide to Youth Violence, and it will be just loaded now. I think my computer's yeah, there we go. You should be live and direct there. Looks like this. There are 31 approaches on there now, including if you have been listening and paying attention or have time in your very busy day, you would have heard about stop and search, actually. So we've got a strand on stop and search here, which it will be very interesting for you to look into. So a couple of things. One, it's the summary of the best available evidence to help you with best bets, whatever your role is in regards to reducing violence. 31 approaches. There's some toggles, pretty sweet stuff. You can toggle to say, actually, if the evidence quality is 1, what programs come up? If it's 5, what programs come up? I just want to know about the high impact program. So let's just do that, and that would toggle for you. So there's also all sorts of toggles along the way, and I'm hoping I can reset this. Otherwise, that's going to get me in trouble. So social skills training, that's what we're talking about today. And it aims to develop children's ability to regulate their behavior and communicate effectively. It's a high impact on violent crime, which is one of the reasons why we're doing this, to just share what's in it. And better than what's on the page, which is important, we want to hear from people about how and what that looks like. And then lastly, just before I finish, we've got the youth sector page, which I'll put into the chat. The youth sector page, there are other sector pages too, so you might sign up to many. There's a newsletter that comes out, and you can view the newsletter right now. And you can go back to previous events. So here's one and only truly. That's always awkward when your face comes up on the video, forget it's there. But you can go in and listen about to previous events, and that spans all our work as well. So if you're really interested in detached youth work, you'll be able to see it here too. I'll stop there and I'll introduce our first guest who's going to speak. As always, cordially, please put your comments in the chat and thoughts in the chat and questions in the chat. And when it comes to panel discussion later, we will go through with them and answer them to the best we can here and now. So our first colleague who's going to be speaking is Alicia. And so Dr. Alicia Clark is the National Programme Manager for Mental Health, Wellbeing and the Health Service Executive in Ireland. If you want to fly anybody over, let me know, Alicia, I'll be up for it. Alicia has over 15 years experience in the field of mental health research. Prior to joining the HSE, Alicia had a range of different positions internationally, including Assistant Director of Evidence at the Early Intervention Foundation, who we work closely with, and Alicia's done lots of work with us formally, and that's why Alicia's here too. And then the Mary Curie Fellow and is a Mary Curie Fellow at the University of Twente in the Netherlands. So I'll stop there and over to you, Alicia. Great to have you.
Thanks so much, Caleb. Good afternoon, everyone. Really great to be here and to present to you today. I'm just going to pull up my slides, so just give me 1 second. Caleb, you might let me know if you can see this, okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, just move them on. Okay, so I'm going to start by just giving you a bit of an overview of what I want to cover in today's session. So firstly, I'll look at the rationale for a focus on children and young people's social and emotional development. So I know Caleb has mentioned social skills, but as part of it, it's very hard to split the two, social and emotional skills. So I'm going to talk about them as a whole set. We're going to look at the definitions around social and emotional skills, and then I'll focus in on 2 key settings for the development of these core skills, and I'll look at the evidence base around these 2 settings. Then I'm going to do just a little bit on the importance of not just programs being implemented in these core settings, but also looking at the types of practices that are in place in these everyday interactions that we use to support social and emotional development. And then a final slide just on key recommendations for policymakers and practitioners. So firstly, in terms of young people's social and emotional development, there's an urgent need really to develop children and young people's social emotional skills, and really as part of that to ensure that they can safely navigate adversity. So when we talk about social emotional skills, we're talking about building positive interpersonal relationships. We're talking about developing that sense of belonging for children and young people, and developing their personal characteristics such as self-belief, confidence, and coping strategies, among lots of others. And the evidence is quite strong on, children, young people with good social and emotional skills often have several of these what we call protective factors, which have been shown to support them in being able to deal with the inevitable adversities that they may be faced with in life. When we look at social and emotional skills and the work that's done in both the school and out of school setting, generally this work operates at 3 levels. So the first level is really around trying to strengthen individuals, so developing these kind of core skills and competencies in individuals. The second level is around strengthening the communities in which children and young people live, work, play. So it's about looking at the community, the ethos and environment of our schools, our out of school settings. And then the third core level is really working at that policy level to try and reduce structural barriers and to address some of the social determinants to good quality of life for our children and young people. So that might be things like dealing with addressing issues around poverty, ensuring we've good access to good quality education, but also access to social recreational activities and sports. The development of social and emotional skills can really, I suppose, be understood metaphorically as like a balance scale where you have protective factors and positive experiences gathered on one side of the scale and risk factors and adverse experiences on the other side of the scale. So when the cumulative burden of negative factors outweighs the positives, the circumstances can be so overwhelming that the scale will lean towards negative developmental outcomes for the young person. And in contrast to this, if the protective factors and positive experiences outweigh the negative, we'll see that the developmental trajectory will lean towards these positive outcomes for young people. And here you can see on the slide that, children and young people with good social and emotional skills, they can experience overall positive outcomes despite living in adverse circumstances. Just a quick note on terminology. You'll be familiar with, the range of terms that are out there and in use at the moment, depending on different disciplinary traditions, to refer to the work that's done around social emotional development. So we hear things like positive youth development, life skills, character education was quite common for a period, 21st century skills, mental fitness, and so on. But really, over the last 2 decades, that concept of social and emotional development has served as, if you like, an umbrella framework to describe the work that we do in this space. And CASEL in the US have really led out on this kind of term and the framework to describe this work. So CASEL's framework addresses 5 broad and interrelated core competencies or skills. These skills can be taught at various developmental stages from childhood right through to adulthood. So just to look very briefly at these kind of 5 core skills. The first skill that we have is self-awareness. And this is all around trying to support our child or a young person in becoming more aware of their strengths, in developing their confidence and their belief in themselves. As part of that emotional self-awareness is hugely important. So being able to understand, to identify, and to articulate the types of emotions that they're experiencing. Then moving into another core skill, self-management. And this really refers to emotional and behavior management. So it's about being able to regulate, supporting young people to regulate their emotions using appropriate coping strategies. But it's also about that kind of behavior. So looking at impulse control, self-discipline, goal setting, and broader kind of more cognitive organizational skills. The next two core competencies or skills are all around social skills. So having that awareness of others, social awareness, being able to take the perspective of other people, to appreciate diversity in our community, to have that respect for others and respect for the opinions of others, and to have empathy towards others. The competency around relationship skills is all about trying to strengthen young children, young people's communication skills, their relationship skills, their ability to engage with others, to manage conflict, and to work collaboratively with others. And then the final core competency, in a way, it sits across all of the other competencies. It's all around responsible decision making and being able to apply that to situations in life. So being able to identify problems, analyze the situation, come up with solutions, and to evaluate and reflect. So Cassell's framework on these kind of core skills has been applied in particular to the school setting over the last 2 to 3 decades. And you can see here with the visual on the right, they have a focus on not just on the curriculum, but also school-wide practices and broadening that out to family and community partnerships. So I'll talk about that kind of approach in a minute. So just to look at kind of the impact and the rationale for the work that we do around social emotional development. So Alyssa Goodman and colleagues looked at the long-term associations between developing social emotional skills in childhood and adolescence and their associations with adult outcomes at up to 42 years of age using the British cohort data. And what we can see from this research is that good social skills are predictors of life satisfaction and well-being. They're predictors of labour market success, partnership status, and good health. In terms of emotional skills, so good emotional well-being, so having a good sense of self-esteem, sense of self, self-awareness, self-perception, is seen to be especially important for outcomes in relation to mental health and well-being in adult life. And the absence of externalizing behavioral difficulties is associated again with adult well-being, but also with educational attainment, income, labour market outcomes, and health, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. Just a piece of work that we did at the Early Intervention Foundation back in 2021. And this was, I suppose, building on the work of Alyssa Goodman, but it was looking at published data around the long-term association between mental health difficulties and also behavioural difficulties, which develop during adolescence and their impact on adult life. So what we could see through this research was looking at 72 international studies, longitudinal data. We can see that adolescents who exhibit behavioural difficulties during adolescence, they're at increased risk of mental health difficulties in adulthood, so depression, anxiety, increased risk of poor employment and educational outcomes, and also poor physical health and social outcomes. So I suppose the findings from these two research papers really, I suppose, illustrate, that social and emotional difficulties that develop during adolescence, they can cast a long shadow into adult life. And I suppose it really highlights the importance of not just investing in the treatment of social and emotional difficulties, mental health difficulties, behavioural difficulties, but I think the real need to focus on prevention and early intervention to reduce vulnerabilities and to enhance protective factors. So moving to the school setting, we know that the school setting is a hugely important setting for the development of these core skills. There's been a huge number of papers which have looked at the evidence base on school settings, a number of high quality meta-analysis studies, systematic reviews. And what we can see from these papers is really that well-designed, well-implemented universal interventions, so these are classroom-based interventions, can have a significant positive impact on young people's social and emotional skills, their attitudes, their behaviour. Also seeing evidence of reduced conduct problems, including aggression, and reduced levels of mental health difficulties such as emotional distress, anxiety, and depression. And it's consistently coming out from the research that the implementation of social emotional interventions in schools can have an impact on academic performance. What do we know about the characteristics of the programs that are most effective? What we can see is that classroom teachers are effective program facilitators. So when they are trained to deliver these interventions, they can deliver these programs with impact. We can see that the most effective interventions in general adopt what we call SAFE principles. And this stands for sequenced, so that they deliver a sequenced, developmentally coordinated set of activities. Active, that the children and young people are active in their learning as opposed to didactic teaching. And focused and explicit is very much on that intentional teaching of a core set of skills, a specific set of skills being taught. The other key characteristics around the programs that are most effective is we see the importance of high quality program implementation. I'm going to come back to this point in a second. The second main type of approach to enhancing social emotional development in children and young people in the school setting is the adoption of a whole school approach. This approach really moves beyond that curriculum focus to extending that learning to the second core pillar, which is the school ethos and environment. And this is around teaching social emotional learning in non-curricular ways. So it's about ensuring that our school vision, our school policies really specify, our expectations in terms of children and young people's social and emotional development and their behaviour norms. It's about looking at our bullying, violence prevention guidelines and how they are aligned to what we believe in terms of children's and young people's social and emotional development. It's really important as part of a whole school approach that we're putting in place professional development opportunities. That teacher training is hugely important. It's also about the non-curricular, the outside the classroom strategies that we're putting in place to promote staff-pupil relations, but also to notice and reinforce those positive behaviours, which can happen in the school corridor or outside in yard. The third core pillar of the whole school approach is about extending that learning into the family and home environment and trying to reinforce strategies that are being taught in school in the home environment, and also linking in with our community partners. So all of the, out of school youth sectors that are working in this and ensuring that we have some alignment. The third core area around social emotional learning in schools is a set of interventions that have a particular focus on behaviour outcomes. So bullying prevention interventions are very common in schools, and these include both curriculum and whole school interventions, which are designed to promote anti-bullying attitudes, behaviour, and to also promote conflict resolution skills. There's really good evidence around the impact of bullying prevention interventions, particularly those that adopt a whole school approach. They've been shown to be effective in reducing both the frequency of bullying victimisation perpetration, but also in enhancing wellbeing outcomes. And the second core type of interventions within the kind of behaviour focus is interventions that are specifically focused on aggression and violence prevention. Generally, these interventions with that kind of social emotional focus target knowledge, they target attitudes, and target specific social emotional skills, the likes of pro-social skills, empathy, problem solving, communication. What we can see around impact is probably less of an impact when you compare it to the bullying prevention. They can have small positive effects on aggressive behaviour in the short term. There's some evidence around impact on bullying, victimisation and pupil wellbeing, but we can see there's a real need for these to be delivered as part of that whole school approach to social and emotional development. So moving on to the community setting. Back in 2015, we did a piece of work for the Early Intervention Foundation, which was looking specifically at the development of social and emotional skills through community-based interventions. So this was a really comprehensive review which looked at interventions delivered right across England. And really these types of social emotional interventions fell into 4 core categories in the out of school setting. So you have social action interventions, youth arts and sports interventions, mentoring interventions, and then kind of your more structured social emotional curricular, which is delivered in the youth sector. So just going to touch on these very briefly. In terms of the social action interventions, this is focused on supporting young people to lead a particular social action project in the community setting. So the aim here is around young people delivering that action, but also around creating positive change for the benefit of that wider community. So it's focused on the young people's outcomes, but also at that kind of community level. The theories underpinning these types of interventions are very much community engagement, social connectedness, and social inclusion. So you can see the range of skills being targeted here, many of them aligned to Castell's frameworks of confidence, relationship building, leadership skills, communication skills, decision making, and teamwork, and so on. Just two examples, which I'm sure you'll be familiar with. The I Will movement is one that you probably have heard of, which is specifically targeting young people in terms of leading out on social action interventions, campaigning, volunteering, and fundraising. And then one that was particularly popular during the time of our review was the National Citizen Service. That's the government-funded social development fund for 16 to 17-year-olds. Moving on to the next approach, it's the youth arts and sports interventions. So these are really around improving youth engagement and developing social emotional skills through the medium of sports, music, drama-based activities, generally delivered through youth clubs. In general, these interventions target young people from low-income and disadvantaged communities, and they're underpinned here by theories of social and emotional development. There's a strong emphasis here around social connection and belonging. So really developing up that kind of sense of belonging to a community and youth empowerment. And just some examples here. Street games, we're obviously going to hear from James in terms of Football Beyond Borders. And I suppose, you know, just another approach that's becoming more popular in the community setting, which kind of encompasses the types of array of sports and arts interventions, is that youth social prescribing approach. Looking at mentoring interventions, so the aim here is really around building social and emotional skills of young people through that support of an adult peer. An adult or a peer. Mentoring interventions, they can be standalone or they can be accompanied by that kind of youth development program or youth sports activities. They're grounded in that mentoring approach, and the focus really is on having a positive role model for the young person and the development of that trusting relationship. And as part of that, then developing key life skills and providing that kind of practical support to young people. Types of interventions in the community setting, they can vary in terms of, you know, 6-week delivery right up to kind of a full year working with the young person. And outcomes can generally target kind of the social and emotional skills, but also conduct problems, peer relationship problems. It's just to mention, Caleb has mentioned it already, mentoring is one of the approaches that YEF have looked at, and we can see that good evidence of impact in terms of reducing levels of crime and violent behaviour. The third type of approach is social emotional learning interventions, which are specifically targeted and implemented in the out of school setting. So unlike the school-based interventions, the cell interventions in school, they generally adopt a more modular approach, so that youth workers can kind of dip in and out of these interventions because of that kind of more flexible format in the youth setting. So they're very interactive and focused on, you know, particular skills and strategies that youth workers may feel young people might benefit from. So this is one program that we're delivering in Ireland in the out of school setting. It's the Mind Out program. It's delivered in both the school and out of school setting, but the out of school setting adopts that kind of much more modular approach. So just very briefly to look at evidence of impact in terms of the out of school setting, it's fair to say that the evidence is not as strong as the school setting. And that's because the evidence is limited as a result of the lack of robust, high quality evaluations that have been carried out. There are good, strong evaluations, but really not as many as you would see in the school setting. And I think the important message here is insufficient evidence, or when the quality of the research is poor, that is not to say that interventions are not effective. It's that we can't draw strong conclusions about the effectiveness of these particular interventions. The other challenge really with the out of school setting, you know, similar to whole school interventions, they're quite complex. They're targeting multiple outcomes in a complex setting. So they can be quite difficult to evaluate. They don't lend themselves to your kind of standard randomized control trial type high quality research. So there really is a need to invest in more high quality research in the out of school setting. Just a note also on implementation, we can see more and more consistent evidence that poor quality implementation has a significant impact on programme outcomes. So when an intervention, evidence-based intervention, is delivered with poor quality, it's unlikely to have that impact that we would expect. And really the point here is that we really need to invest not just in that training prior to our, be it youth workers or teachers prior to them delivering the intervention, but also that provision of ongoing support to our youth workers, to our teachers, so that we can support them in addressing some of the challenges that they're faced with, when they're delivering these interventions. Equally, there's a need to invest in kind of that monitoring for quality assurance. So very briefly, I know I'm tight on time, so I'm just going to move quickly on to just a final area on thinking about a focus on not just the delivery of programs in both the school and out of school setting, but also thinking about the practices. So when I mentioned earlier, the adoption of a whole school approach, it's about the curriculum, the programs that are put in place, but also the supportive environments. The supportive environments are hugely important for our young people to develop their social emotional skills. Social emotional skills are developed through our daily interactions with young people. It's not just about, delivering an intervention for 6 to 12 weeks. It's about our daily interactions. It's hugely important for those daily interactions that we need to ensure that our staff are equipped with confidence and skills to support children and young people's social and emotional development. So when you think about it, when we did a piece of work which talked to teachers around this, the everyday interactions, what are the questions that they would like us to answer? And these are just some of the key questions that they told us. As a teacher, how can I build supportive relationships with my students in my everyday interactions? If I'm a maths teacher or a physics teacher, how can I encourage positive peer relationships in my classroom? How can I create that inclusive environment for our young people? How can I support young people to manage and understand their emotions, again, through my everyday interactions? How can I help them to set goals, to work towards challenges? How can I teach responsible decision making? And how can I help young people to manage everyday stress, low mood and anxieties? So this for us was a huge challenge because it's about moving beyond just, having a teacher delivering a curriculum focused on that individual level to much more the ethos and environment of our classrooms, our schools, and our youth settings. So in 2022, we worked with the Anna Freud Research Centre and developed a classroom wellbeing toolkit for secondary school teachers, which was very much speaking to this delivering and teaching of strategies through everyday interactions with young people. So we have, I can ask Caleb to send on this toolkit if you're interested. We have a number of chapters in this that very much speak to the point of the everyday interactions for young people. I won't talk about, I have some slides here that show you some of those evidence-informed practices. I can give you some examples in the Q&A if helpful. But I suppose just to finish up with a final slide from me really around, looking back at the school, out of school setting, what we know about social emotional development, what are the kind of key implications here for both policymakers and practitioners, and what are the gaps in our evidence base? I think based on what we know, it's really important that we incentivize and support the use of programs and approaches with that established evidence of improving young people's outcomes. And I think we have to make that easier for schools and the out of school setting to be able to access those evidence-based interventions. I've mentioned this already, but I really do believe we have to work on the development of teacher and youth workers' skills, but equally their confidence in this whole area of social emotional development, that this isn't a job just for, someone who's going to teach that particular curriculum, but actually it's all our business. We need to support that high quality implementation. We know that low quality implementation, we're not likely to see impact. So how do we better support high quality implementation through our training, but also our provision of ongoing support? We really also need to invest in high quality evaluation research, particularly in the out of school setting, where we take those innovative, most promising approaches and we look at, some rapid cycle testing and look at, the best way to evaluate these types of interventions where they are complex. I really do think we need to invest in that co-development and evaluation of interventions, which have been specifically designed to meet the needs of those who've been disproportionately affected by violence. A lot of the work is focused on universal delivery, and we know that certain young people are disproportionately affected, and there's a need to do more work, rapid cycle testing, co-development, and evaluation of innovative interventions, I think, in this space. And a final point around For me, a hugely important area is sustainability of effective interventions. We are good at running trials. I think we're less good. We're doing more at the moment, but I think we can do more in the whole area of how do we ensure that these effective interventions are embedded within practice? Once the research moves away, what needs to happen to really ensure that these interventions are delivered with quality on an ongoing basis? That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alicia. And so much there. A lot around conditions, in terms of implementation and settings being so important, but the workforce being hugely important too, to be able to undertake the work. And I've got questions on my mind, which I'll park for now just due to time. So next to come in are this virtual learning cafe on the role of youth work in social skills training to reduce youth violence. It's great to invite James Reeves to the microphone, who's the senior policy officer at Football Beyond Borders, who are an organisation that believes in the power of relationships to transform lives. Their vision is for every young person to have a trusted adult by their side throughout teenage years, so it's adolescent times of change. They deliver long-term, relatable, consistent relationships to young people, along with an award-winning social and emotional learning curriculum, which is delivered in classrooms, and football pitches, which is a great mix, in partnership with 50 schools and 3,000 young people in London, North West, and the West Midlands. James, the floor is yours. Oh, you're on mute, by the way, James. Sorry. Oops. Yeah, it's all right.
Oh dear, that's not a good start, is it? Thanks. Yeah, thanks for inviting us today, Caleb. I really appreciate it, and Alicia as well, for that brilliant intro. Today we're going to talk about social and emotional skills as well. And yeah, we use the CASEL framework across all of our curriculum modules. Also going to focus on the importance of effective expert facilitators. And also pleased to share that the University of Sussex have done an evaluation on our SEL intervention and found that it had a statistically significant positive effect on the social and emotional development of young people. So yeah, really pleased to be here today. I'll just reshare my slides again. Just bear with. All right. So we're going to talk about social emotional learning and how integral it is to our work at FBB. And we're also going to focus on the importance of trusted adults in delivering social skills work. Or in other words, trusted adults, the individuals that young people turn to when they need someone to talk to. So I'm going to start
James,
off by...
Sorry to interrupt. Your slides haven't loaded for whatever strange. They were fine in the pre-run. But they haven't loaded. Well, they're not on our main screen. I don't know.
Okay, hold on. Sorry.
Yeah.
Can you see them now?
So we're seeing when you go to click play, or it seems like it just jumps out back to us as an audience.
I'll share from the PDF then. Hopefully this works. Can you see those?
Yeah, we can see those. That'll be good. Yeah. Let's go with that.
All right. We'll go with that. All right.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, James.
All good. So, as I said, we're going to talk about trusted adults as well as social skills, or the individuals that young people turn to when they need someone to talk to. So we're going to give you a little bit on our origin story, a little bit on the journey that we've gone through to incorporate social and emotional learning into our theory of change. And then we're going to talk about our impact with young people and our vision for the systems that our young people interact with. Something that has always underpinned our approach is a commitment to learning. So if you do have any questions or challenges or comments, please do put them in the chat as we share. And if someone could flag those for me, I'm happy to take them as they come. So in terms of our origin story, we began by running community football sessions in Kennington Park in 2011. This was a journey that began with a bag of balls and some bibs and young people who just wanted to play football. And our founders ran these sessions for a couple of years. And then in 2014, they had a call from a friend working at one school in Croydon. And at the school, there was a group of boys who were energetic, they were confident, but they were getting drawn into trouble both inside and outside of school. And at this point, FEB went in to start working with them, and it was pretty much a homework club. An hour in the classroom to finish their work, and then an hour on the football pitch as a reward. And soon after that summer, we ran a summer tour with them to Scotland. And on that tour, one of the boys, Jordan, asked if FEB would be coming back to carry on in the next school year. And he didn't quite get the response that he wanted. And his response was to say, "You're a snake. You're like every adult. You come into my life and then you leave." And after that, our founders decided to quit their jobs and officially founded FEB as a charity. And now FEB is working in London, the Northwest and the West Midlands, supporting 2,600 young people every week, providing a trusted adult, working to prevent exclusions, develop social and emotional skills, and help towards GCSE and English and maths attainment. So you see that football's in our name, and that's because it's our Trojan horse. So everything that Football Beyond Borders do is focused on relationships with young people. And football is, in our opinion, one of the most powerful tools in the world for building relationships. We've got a theory of relationships, which is based on the idea that through shared memorable moments and experiences and shared sort of disclosure about elements of ourselves and things that happen in our lives over a long period of time, if you have all of those ingredients, then you can build really strong relationships with anyone. So as I said, relationships really do underpin everything about our approach to youth work. We deliver youth work in schools because at the moment, the school system isn't set up to prioritize teachers building relationships with their students. They don't receive adequate training. They don't have the incentives to build these relationships, and school cultures really aren't inclusive of the most vulnerable. And as a result, a third of young people aren't getting their GCSEs. There are record numbers of permanent exclusions and suspensions, and young people's well-being is in crisis. And in 10 years, the programme has grown at a pretty quick pace and largely through word of mouth, which I think highlights that it works. It highlights that schools and teachers really trust us to work with their most vulnerable students. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the development of our theory of change and how we built social and emotional learning skills into that. And how we focus explicitly, as Alicia said, the explicit focus on social and emotional skill development. There's a bit of an argument in schools around whether this should be caught or taught. Our view is that social and emotional skills need to be taught explicitly. So when we began developing our curriculum around 2016, take it back 8 years, we had foundational theories, attachment theory informed by likes of Carl Rogers, Gabor Mate, adolescent neuroscience, developmental trauma, and gender constructivism. We had public products within this project-based approach. We knew that it was important for young people to see the kind of products and feel pride in their learning by being able to see things that they created in and around their school and their sessions. And we knew the importance of experiences and opportunities to build those relationships. And in 2018, we began incorporating social and emotional learning specifically into our theory of change. The focus then was on really improving behavior and improving attitude to learning. And so SEL became a really useful way to start to frame these things. And those 5 core skills, self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, and relationship skills, started to become things that we were really pushing our practitioners to drive in young people. But we realized that it wasn't enough just to have SEL as the kind of focus for development. We needed to ensure that we were explicit about creating the curriculum modules that could work on specific skills in ways that were also really engaging, meaningful, and relatable to young people. So you'll see some examples of some of those curriculum modules on the screen now. What Makes a Man is a project that we deliver to invite boys to explore their self-awareness and understand different forms of masculinity. Might challenge the idea of individuals like Andrew Tate, for example. FC Futures, which is where we look at the power of football to develop social change, really focusing on social awareness here. obviously the likes of Raheem Sterling, Marcus Rashford, and so on have campaigned quite publicly around different social issues. So we use those individuals and you know, our young people's heroes as the kind of guiding light in that module. And then finally, Game Changers, which is a brilliant anti-racist project focused on developing self and social awareness and helping young people to explore their own identities and Black British history, which may not be available on the existing curriculum. And in delivering these resources, I spent a lot of time and money in making sure that they were as high quality as they can be. And we hope that the curriculum and assessment review that's going on at the moment does some similar things on SEL. But one of the really important things about developing social and emotional skills is that it's not enough just to know what they are, you really have to feel them. And this is why we use the classroom and the football pitch. So the football pitch is a great place to learn the skills that we're talking about. The classroom, sorry, is a great place to learn the skills, but on the football pitch, you can go and experience them. So we have one module, for example, which is called Perfect Penalty, where we help our young people look at kind of what's going on in their prefrontal cortex during high pressure situations. And they go out and they take a penalty and they feel that, they embody it. And then it's up to practitioners to kind of create the teachable moments. But in order to do that, it requires really high quality practitioners. So you'll see there in our theory of change, the different mechanisms of change that we've got there, and explicit teaching of social and emotional skills features, as does expert relational practitioners. I haven't focused on long-term intensive support, a sense of belonging, and that embeddedness across school and home. I feel like Alicia's touched on them a little bit, but it would take a lot more than the length of time in this presentation. But back to that focus on developing expert practitioners. In 2021, we had a big shift away from what we deliver to who delivers it. And here they are, a team of professionals from all of our regions, each with their own unique approach to supporting young people. All of us receive weekly CPD through our practitioner training program, which builds the kind of essential skills necessary to deliver trauma-informed relational work with young people. And our focus, as I said, has always been on developing relationships, celebrating young people's assets, providing memorable moments and experiences. And we wanted to focus on developing practitioners whose lived experiences could combine with professional qualifications to help them become those consistent, trusted and relatable adults, but also with the training to provide therapeutically informed, culturally competent, bespoke support to young people who have very complex needs. I haven't shared that in this presentation, but following on from Alicia's point earlier around whole school approaches, a significant part of our work now focuses on delivering whole school approaches to social and emotional development. So working with teachers, sometimes, all teachers will go and deliver entire days with them to kind of teach some of these skills that we deliver with our practitioners. So if anyone wants to hear more about those, please do reach out. Now I'm going to come on to how we tackle disproportionality with regards to education outcomes. So we support students who are most at risk of being failed by the system due to structural racism, inadequate support systems. And we know that we're reaching the types of young people who are most likely to need additional support. Our young people, when they're referred to FEB, are disproportionately likely to become not in education, employment or training after secondary school. So compared to average young person in a school, they're 6 times more likely to have been suspended from school, 3.5 times more likely to have a statement for social, emotional or mental health condition, 2 times more likely to have an unauthorized absence from school, and 2 times more likely to be growing up in poverty. Additionally, they're 10 times more likely to be of a Black Caribbean ethnicity than the average young person. And we know that Black Caribbean young people on free school meals are permanently excluded at 4 times the rate than all young people on free school meals. So the different kind of pillars of that approach to tackling disproportionality are here: strategic commitment to being representative of young people from participant all the way to board, a decision-making principle on dynamic hierarchy. So That's essentially where whoever has the most amount of information about a particular challenge or issue that we're trying to deal with will be the kind of lead practitioner in making those decisions. And then finally, a theory of knowledge which prioritizes direct lived experience above all other forms of knowledge. Going to whiz through our impact just because I'm kind of conscious of time. So we know that this approach works. Last year, 93% of our young people finished the year still in school. Those stats have been consistently between kind of 93 and 98% over the past 5 years. And last year, our young people were 9 times more likely to pass their English and maths GCSEs. And then just to finish, we really think that trusted adults are the things that make a difference when it comes to delivering social emotional skills training or to young people. They help young people feel seen, they help young people feel heard, and then supported really to develop these key skills. There's some examples there of the kind of approach that we take to one-to-ones, contracting with young people, making sure that it's centered, allowing them to explore themselves, their identities. These are all things that also form part of the one-to-one pillar that we haven't touched on with the focus on our social emotional curriculum today. And then finally, our kind of vision for the system is where every young person has access to a trusted adult at school. We're trying to create a board at the moment of people who can influence the system in such a way. Our vision is really to try and help this be established in one school. So one school where every single young person at the school feels like they have that trusted adult role model. So if you're interested in helping us realize that vision, again, please do reach out afterwards and to join the movement. And then you can see that my details are there on screen now. I'll stop there.
Oh, James, thanks so much for taking us through your journey around how from the founding to the getting into the evidence base to make it work in the work that you're doing to make sure that young people are getting the top dollar of a service. But equally, what's really fantastic to hear is that how hard you guys have worked to like embed this sort of thing. That can't have been easy, and I'm sure there's lots of questions later on. And thanks so much for sharing about how you're tackling disproportionality too. There's so much here about conditions in which the trusted adult works, and then almost the flow through of how that works in a school setting, and you can see how this is really coming together. So thanks so much, James. Stick around for Q&A. Lucy, thank you so much for joining us today. And Lucy is the CEO and founder of Bounce Forward, and is proud of her beginnings as a youth worker and 17 years in developing, reforming and managing children's services before Bounce Forward. 2009, Lucy's focus has been to drive a movement to influence UK policy to form a positive system of change with psychological fitness at the core. So, Lucy, over to you, and really look forward to hearing you top up on what we've heard so far.
Yeah, thanks, Caleb. And just checking you can hear me okay, and you can see the slides okay.
Yes, Roger.
Okay,
Roger.
great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. I can't see people's faces, but I often think I'm now often the oldest person in the room. I've been involved in this work now for far too long in one way, and all the things that we hear from both Alicia and from James. I started this work back in sort of 2005-06. At the time, I was working for a local authority. I had a strategic responsibility around vulnerable young people. I don't think we've sort of changed our position on who those young people are. And I don't know, in some ways, we've sort of come a long way with our understanding, of sort of the impact that social emotional learning can have. And then in some ways, I might argue that we've not really come that far at all. But anyway, that will maybe be for the Q&A later. And I'm sort of old enough as well to remember a time when we had very traditional youth services. I mean, my background is, I began as a youth worker when local authorities really invested in clubs and youth workers and, all of that stuff around adults, around children and young people, the old saying that it takes a village to raise a child. And, part of this, I think, is the idea that we've sort of become very isolated in the way that we bring up children. And perhaps, that's part of the knock-on effect. But anyway, I've been invited here today to talk specifically about Healthy Minds, which is a school-based intervention, which I'm just going to do briefly, just talk about that research. But I then also just wanted to take the opportunity to share our theory of change around personal development and how I believe that that then has an opportunity in outer school settings and with adults and so on as well. Just make sure my slides do move on. So I'm here to talk about Healthy Minds, which was a randomized controlled trial. We tracked 10,000 children over 5 years. It was funded by the Education Endowment Foundation. We actually started the work in 2011. So it's, quite old now in terms of where the research started, because it was 5 years. Bounce Forward's role in it was, I led the project. I was responsible for the project management of it, and then Bounce Forward was responsible for the curriculum development and for recruiting the schools and for the staff training. The London School of Economics led the research on the health and social emotional side of the research, and the National Institute of Social and Economic Research were responsible for the academic side of it. So, the research question was, back in the day, so it's started a long time ago. Bounce Forward had come off the back of research on the Penn Resilience Programme, which is a programme designed from positive psychology, cognitive behavioural theory and so on. All of K-Cell's work as well would have been impacted on that, where we saw really, we taught 18 lessons of the Penn Resilience Programme, and we saw really significant outcomes, not only for a year, also at the end of the second year, where it still saw improvements for those children that we might worry most about, special educational needs, those that were not achieving national averages, and those that had a high level of anxiety, depression to start off with. And then we continued to track them for another whole year, and by the end of the third year, the outcomes had petered out. So often you see the Penn Resilience Programme sort of criticised because there are, the outcome, there are disconnect between the outcomes. But we track kids for 3 years after just teaching them, 18 lessons. So anyway, off the back of that research, Lord Richard Layard at the London School of Economics, who is, I don't know, I would call him the happiness suru, been involved in, sort of all sorts of things around why happiness is important and social emotional learning within that, said, what would happen then if we continued this teaching and learning? Could we sustain those outcomes? And that's really where Healthy Minds came from. Very well funded. So, again, going back a few years, but it was about £1.3 million was invested in this project over the time. And the PSHE association are there is because we also had a steering group that sort of met and was managing the project and so on. So the curriculum development again started even before that. So there was some research by the Paul Hamlin Foundation. A guy called Dan Hale had the wonderful job of going around the world and looking for evidence-based elements that would deliver our then PSHE curriculum. Obviously our understanding of adolescent development. So we worked with Dr. John Coleman on making sure that this curriculum was relevant to around adolescent development. Important in terms of age and what young people were concerned about at that time. The then PSHE framework and guidelines, we worked to make sure it delivered on those, and also practical considerations, how many weeks in the year do we have, term time, what's realistic for schools to embed and so on. And then, ultimately what the Paul Hamlin Foundation research was a long list of programs. So then when we looked at, covering all of these other things, we deleted some. For example, there was a program in there which was 20 hours of teaching young people to say no to sex. We felt it wouldn't really fit within a UK environment. We all had for more grown-up conversation with young people about what sex is and how you might get involved in it. And then, there was nothing on social media. Again, the Paul Hamlin Foundation really was, pre-social media. So again, we wanted to make sure that we had something in there around technology and social media. So in total, there were 113 lessons, taught one lesson per week, 1 hour per week for 4 years. We recruited 34 schools, it was a nightmare recruiting schools, you know, back in the day when we didn't really know what this thing called, you know, well-being was really, certainly not in any, you know, way that we do today. And I was saying to them, oh, come and join this project where you're going to teach well-being, and all we need is one lesson per week for 4 years. And we need to take your staff out for training, actually 19 days of training they had. So it was, you know, it's a pretty big ask of head teachers to get involved in this. But yeah, we recruited 34 schools in total. They were then at that point randomised, you know, none of us knew which of the schools would be control schools and which of the schools would be treatment schools. But we needed that because that's what allowed us to be able to assess the impact, you know, with confidence. And when I say we, you know, I wasn't involved I was involved in supporting collecting the data, but I wasn't involved in that was done by the LSE and the National, you know, NISA. But we collected baseline data. So all of those 10,000 children we collected, they had to do this horrendous 2 things. One was this great big questionnaire, validated questionnaire. It took them about an hour to complete it, really long. And then they also had to do a maths and English test initially. So, you know, it's a big undertaking for these young people that are involved. And I'm always, you know, want to just shout out to them because, you know, they helped us understand a lot. Or forgive you can hear my dog in the background. We then collected data at year 2 and at year 4. And, you know, Alicia was mentioning about internalising and externalising behaviour. And overall, that's really what we were asking through these questionnaires. We were asking young people to think about how they feel inside. And then we were looking at their behaviour, you know, how they responded and behaved externally. And it was obviously both, you know, mainly quantitative, but there was a qualitative element of it as well that included asking teachers their opinion of it, and with student focus groups as well. And yeah, you know, we've already heard about the importance of teacher training, and these teachers had 19 days. I mean, it's unheard of now to be able to take staff out of school for that amount of time. But, you know, I believe these teachers are some of the most experienced teachers around this, having had that amount of training in this space. The results speak for themselves, and that for those people that were interested in the, you know, in the research, you know, the paper, please get in touch. But basically, we saw significant outcomes across you know, general health, life satisfaction and physical health, you know, and Alicia's already spoken about the long arm impact of things like life satisfaction. And then we still saw positive gains in emotional health and behaviour. Things like fixed term exclusions were reduced, attendance was improved, you know, some of the stuff around bullying and so on. I just want to say something about some of the things, like, you know, the research is great, but from our point of view as the sort of delivery partner, if you like, we had some really interesting observations along the way. And the one was the midway data. So when the midway results came in at 2 years, the impact on internalising behaviour was recorded as negative. And I remember thinking, well, that's a good thing, isn't it? You know, if young people are able to express what they're feeling inside, but that their behaviour that they were taking was still positive, so that was still seen in the positive end of things. Surely that's what good quality teaching learning is all about, right? To provide a space where children can feel, you know, be able to articulate their negative emotions, if you like, but what they did about them was still positive. So I always think that's a really interesting aspect. The hidden children, I think, is a really important message. We found this in our research with the Penn Resilience Programme as well, that when obviously we needed to safeguard children through this. And so any of those questions that would have highlighted to us the children, young people that we would have worried about most, you know, about a third of those children were not on the school's radar at all. So it's a really important message for me that whilst we might think a lot better at being able to identify those children and young people that do have a problem or are more likely to experience a problem, for us, both in our original research and in Healthy Minds, we recognise that there are about a third of children that we are not going to pick up that way, which is why good quality teaching and learning for all is so important. We did not measure impact on staff, but boy, do I wish we had. The amount of teachers that we said things to me like, Lucy, it reminded me why I got into teaching. This, you know, they also had a massive impact. I mean, you know, on themselves, you know, like the sort of psychological impact that it had on them, and the resilience that it increased in them. So, you know, we only have anecdotal stuff around that, and I've been trying ever since to follow up some research on impact on staff as well. And then we had anecdotal reports from schools about the impact. So, you know, a really grown up project, and really just one example of really, you know, what Alicia was talking about earlier in terms of the curriculum and learning aspect of a whole school approach. But what I believe we did in Healthy Minds was to extend that, because of the teacher training, because of the wider impact that would have beyond the classroom. To me, is a really, really important aspect, and one that I believe we have not continued to invest in. Again, come back to the Q&A on that, because you know, maybe you can ask what it means. But just beyond the research, I just wanted, you know, we have now been, first of all, trying to scale up Healthy Minds ever since, with, you know, unsuccessfully being able to do that, you know, and there are, you know, we have, I don't know, 225 schools at the moment, secondary schools, who do teach Healthy Minds, but it's still a small number, you know, given that we have 3,400 state or academy schools, and, you know, about another 3,000 independent schools, right? So it's still a tiny percentage. For me, our theory of change around is the bit that I think, you know, where we work beyond schools as well. So for us, our theory of change, first of all, looks to the research, you know, including things like K-cell, but also, you know, our Maston's work. What are the protective factors that enable resilience, you know, and a whole load of evidence, you know, based on systematic reviews. We have then converted that into 8 skills. So there is these 8 resilience skills, a real drill down on the psychological aspect of how we can be mentally resilient and emotionally well. And it's through, you know, each of those are teachable, we can measure them, we can practice them. And our theory is that if we understand what those skills are, and that we start to apply them to our everyday lives, whether that's in brilliant projects like Football Beyond Borders or others, that we become competent. And these competencies are what enable us all to be psychologically fit, to be mentally resilient, to be emotionally well. And the reason it's a cycle for us is because it's ongoing throughout life. You know, I sit in front of you as an almost 58-year-old woman now, and at the times when the things come at me that I'm not expecting, I need to go right back to the drawing board with those skills, because I've not thought about how do I apply these skills in the context of this new thing that I'm dealing with. And that is an ongoing, but for us, you know, really important through adolescence, because it's about laying down those positive neural pathways that I can overcome setbacks and challenges, and I can make the most of opportunities, is really important. These are the 8 skills. You know, I'm obviously not going to go into any of them with any detail, but there is a pedagogy to them, each builds, and so there's a flow to them. I believe these skills are useful to every single human being. Doesn't matter who you are, where you've come from, because it's in these skills and being able to return to these skills that I can become competent. And these are our interpretation of the research, which include, you know, but these are sort of bounce forwards competencies. And what we say to schools beyond the teaching and learning of something like Healthy Minds, make sure you're developing these things, because if you're offering children and young people the opportunity to be able to develop any of these areas, you will be building their competency in mental resilience and emotional well-being. The question about disproportionality I was asked to focus on, and for me, there's an intellectual thing in learning these skills, right? There's something that I've got to understand, and I've got to understand it enough to be able to articulate it back to somebody else. But then once I've learned that, once I get the skill, I've then got to start thinking about how does this help me communicate who I am and what I want and what's going on and what's important to me. And in doing that, how does it help me understand and respect others? And this idea of communication and empathy, these are human qualities that really matter, not, you know, for whoever we are, no matter what. And I want to finish by saying, you know, we know very well now that human bias exists in all of us. And part of what bounced forward, the sort of narrative that we are trying to get out there with schools, is that, you know, the idea that emotional well-being is not a nice to have. Emotional well-being, mental resilience, these are things that actually enable people to, you know, to be brave and to challenge their bias and to choose kindness. And, you know, something that Lord Richard Layard says a lot is, you know, it should be society's aim to encourage as many people as possible to, you know, increase as much, you know, create as much happiness as possible, and definitely the least misery. Two more slides. One is just an overview of the Healthy Minds curriculum for those of you that are interested, and when you get the slides you'll be able to have it. And I just wanted to shout out for some free things that are coming. If any of you are in and around with the Winchester or Hampshire area, there's a CPD event on the 15th of October. It's completely free for school or education staff, and they will leave with free teaching and learning resources, whether that's Healthy Minds or some of our other evidence-based elements. For anyone that is linked to the military community, we have a project with the Armed Forces, Raise Resilience, which is about teaching parents these skills. It starts on the 8th of October. There's a project in we're running with Northampton Council to bring Healthy Minds to all the secondary schools in Northampton, and also to work with parents. And very specifically, Decorum in Hertfordshire, there's a Raise Resilience programme as well. If anybody's interested in any of those, please contact me. I'll put my email address in the chat. Thanks very much, Caleb.
Great, thank you so much, Lucy. And again, what a fantastic exemplar kind of playback of where you've come from and what you've done, and actually the pedigree in which you did such robust trials as well in that regard. So time for Q&A. Really look forward to what colleagues might have piqued in that regard. I'll kick off with an easy one, and I'll probably come to James on this easy one, because you talked lots about it in your, and actually Lucy, you covered it too, and at least you might want to play into it too. But the key question that Sandra asked is how to move generic practice to focus on children who are at risk of violence. And James, you touched on it a little bit, that the school was trusting you to work with these individuals that they highlighted. And then the flip side of that, Lucy, you've got this enigma about hidden children who actually no one knew about. So James, you want to come in first, and then we'll go to Lucy, and Alicia, if there's got anything to say to that, we'll come to you too.
Yeah, I suppose the first thing I'll say, and I'll try and wrap up reasonably quickly because there's loads you could go into here, is there's obviously a massive importance in a universal approach within a school whereby culture of social skills is being developed, where all young people are receiving this training. But obviously there are certain young people who face greater challenges and have maybe more complex needs than others. And so our work is very targeted in that we'll work with schools with an explicit enrollment criteria of the young people that we think are most in need of additional support. So they might have previous experience of exclusions, they might have a number of adverse childhood experiences, they might have really high behavior points, and you know, these things exist, and we have, the school system is like awash with really high quality data on a lot of this stuff, and so we need to use it better to, I suppose, refine our approach. And then in terms of then targeting your work with young people, if you're delivering a session to a classroom and there are particular individuals who aren't necessarily engaging as much as others, then how can you use that, the one-to-one, that really relational element of your work to identify why that might be? Like, what are the things that are going on for that young person, to then understand, you know, which social skill might they need to develop more, which do we need to talk to parents and carers about developing and working with them, so that in every I suppose environment that those skills are being developed. How can you work with the other teachers that they're interacting with to ensure that we're being very like bespoke for every young person, because every young person has different needs.
Yeah, thanks, James. Lucy, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting, isn't it? Because one of the things that we find with our work is the idea around positive peer relationships. And, you know, schools often say to us, you know, we can't deliver it to everyone. So what would your advice be? And I say, if you've got a group that you want to target, make sure you add in some other children and young people that you were not wanting to target, because of the learning opportunity that we've got from each other. I mean, on a really simple level, I don't know, I might be a young person who feels like I don't have a voice for whatever reason, and then I'm in a class with the person who has the biggest voice, and do you know what I mean, seems very confident and so on, and then they're able together to say, oh, they actually worry about some of the same things that I do, and vice versa. So there's that element of it. The second bit would be the bit around, you know, my background is in youth work, and I used to do a lot of work with children in the looked after system. And one of the most empowering things that I could say to them is, could you help me with something? And I think that idea of giving, you know, empowering young people to be able to support each other, that sort of idea of being a mentor to each other. And again, if you're only doing that in specific groups, which, you know, obviously it's really important that we support the children that need it most, but it's an interesting thing going on there, and partly linked to this idea about hidden children. And again, not statistically relevant, but, you know, my own personal research, you know, I tracked young people who looked at the characteristics of young people who took their life by suicide. And when you look at the characteristics often of those young people that take that devastating choice, often they are not, you know, they're often doing well in school, they've got similarly supportive families, they've, you know, got friendship groups. So I don't know, there's something going on here where I agree that we need to provide targeted support, and I absolutely agree around trusted adults and making sure that, you know, that young people have got that opportunity around, you know, as many adults as possible. And I also think, you know, how do we build on these ideas at a universal level so that we are learning and growing together, and what we and the added value of that, you know. So not really an answer, but just some observations, really, you know.
I'm gonna knit that into something that Alicia said earlier. Alicia, a lot of your insight spoke heavily about the reality and the realization about the conditions that need to exist in order to work with children and young people who are in the kind of complex space, and that those existing set of factors from culture within the school to, can you want to just share a bit more about those things? Because I think if that's really well wedded, you get to the sorts of children that Lucy, you described there. But yeah, Alicia, tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. And like, I think, Lucy, I would agree with absolutely everything you've said. I thought I was going to be controversial by coming in saying, I think that we do need to focus on, you know, the universal in order to do targeted, because I would just fundamentally agree, you know, the targeted is important. It's a hugely important aspect of the work that we do. But if the foundation isn't there for all our pupils, you're almost, you know, providing something for and setting that kind of expectation that this is only applicable to certain pupils who, you know, there's something wrong here. But actually, it's not. These social and emotional skills are universal, and they're for everyone. But to go to your point, Caleb, just on the conditions, yeah, like, I think unfortunately it's not a nice, neat package around how you can kind of set up these conditions. It's messy territory, you know, and it involves a lot of work, which is why it's harder for us through research to be able to show that, you know, the whole school approach is kind of the kind of effective approach. But it's about all of the kind of things that we do at that school level or in the youth sector, you know, through the ethos and environment. So some of it's very practical in terms of the policies that we have in place, but others it's much more subtle in terms of how we're interacting. Is the youth voice there? And is that kind of really active in terms of the decisions that we're making around strategies we want to put in place? How are we kind of supporting those kind of pupil staff relations, and then the pupil peer relations, and how they're acting as role models for each other? So it's the area that's kind of, it's more it's more muddy. And like we've seen consistently through research, you know, we're very good at delivering kind of structured interventions, but actually we need to do an awful lot more space to make that more explicit for schools on these core areas.
Yeah. And I mean, your point there is like, you know, the controllables, which is your implement well elements. These are the conditions in which this works best. And there are some uncontrollables. So within the content, and this is the thing about research and evidence, is that there are some things which are uncontrollable. Structural poverty is uncontrollable, but this is what you can do within that. And that's, you know, not stay in your lane, but like be aware that you can drive well in your lane if you just focus on these things and do it well. So no, thank you, Alicia. Sandra, do come in. Great.
Have to learn from previous bad practice where these children were traditionally corralled into the relationship with the deputy head, perhaps, and the deputy head in the exclusion room, and also with the schools officers. So it's that corralling has been going on for so long and still continues. And then as soon as they become corralled, then they start getting treated as at risk or at risk of criminality and so on and so forth. So that to me is the question, addresses the question of targeting, but targeting to the right people and moving them away from, I'm sorry to say so, the wrong people, i.e. police and those kind of interventions that we've been used to for so long to date.
Yeah, Sandra, really good point. Like what colleagues are saying here is in the school setting, through the pedagogy of workshops with staff who are either youth workers or other, it can include teachers. I mean, the fact that Lucy mentioned that the teachers had 19 days of training is a phenomenon. I mean, I think they get about 3 or 4 inset days alone now. In a very, so like, yeah. What's helpful is if you check out the toolkit. I won't take too much of the mic. The toolkit says these things work and these things don't. And I'm saying that really bluntly as a bit of a blunt tool. But there's 31 approaches that are all trying to do similar things. And some of it is about, for example, with policing, at the moment, what we can talk about policing is if it's a focus deterrence program, policing is worthwhile in being part of it. If it's a hotspots policing program, the policing can do it from that view in that way. If it's a police in schools, we don't know. We don't know what that looks like at the moment, yet there's a lot that happening and we're testing that at the moment. So thank you so much for your points, Sandra, really helpful. Celicia, is that right? Is that how you say it?
Hello, yeah, hi Caleb. Yeah, that's correct, thanks.
Great.
A question for Lucy, but maybe James feels like he can well. The parent resilient workshops sound really good. How do you get parents or carers who need those workshops the most regarding timings, incentives, or does it work better with currently established groups? How do you get them to attend those workshops? And what are some of the best examples of parent workshops that you've seen?
Thanks for your question. I mean, we don't have any problems getting parents to our courses. I mean, but mostly they're free, so you know it takes away the financial barrier. That they are mostly virtual. They're mostly in the evening or during the day and recorded. So even if a pet that can't turn up for one session, at least they can catch up on demand. So we make lots of aspects around it that make it easy. During, I mean, it won't be a surprise for you to know that during COVID, we were funded quite a lot by quite a lot of local authorities because we, had something to deliver for parents. And we've reached almost 17,000 parents now from all different, areas. We worked intensively in Oldham where there are, real sort of targeted type approaches that you might want to take with people. But it's not, our approach is that this is not about how to be a parent. This is a program which is going to help you understand the psychological development of your children. And they come thinking about, because they want their children to be more resilient. So, that's a drive for them to come. And they learn that what they realize quite quickly is that actually a lot of this stuff is useful for them, as you know, personally as well. So we don't have any trouble at all, you know, getting parents to come on the course. And because it comes from a positive angle as well, this is not necessarily about what you're doing wrong. It's about understanding the brain, you know, a bit about the brain and what's going on, and starting from what you're doing well. And so people want to come to it. Do you know what I mean? Because you can't really, you know, you know, they want to get involved in it. So yeah, perhaps not the answer that you were expecting, but yeah, we don't seem to have a problem around that at all. What we do have problem is getting funding to do more and more of them. That's where Bounce Forward has trouble, because we really struggle to get funding, you know, to do anything in a sustainable way. But that's another story.
Thank you, Lucy. Rebecca, do come in. Good to see you.
I'm not sure if I have a question, more sort of reflecting on the first question that was asked. And I think I'll be getting in touch with all of you separately. We in Kent and Medway, we've been doing a project with the alternative provisions. The original ask from the commissioners here was to develop a programme, a sort of SEL programme to train staff in for them to roll out, but they very strongly didn't want that. And what the programme has turned into focuses more on, I guess, what you were talking about in terms of whole school approach, school culture, thinking about sort of every interaction as an intervention. So what we do a lot of actually is consultation and training with staff. So I'm sort of in those provisions at least monthly, if not sort of more regularly. And it's very much thinking about some of our work is helping them develop their own curriculums that they're doing with the young people. But actually, the project has much more. This is from the PRUs themselves, focused on the needs of staff and their sort of knowledge and confidence and sense of being supported to deliver these informal interactions, I guess, with young people. Yes, I just thought it was quite interesting, especially Alicia, you sort of talking about the research, that I think that was the ask from our site, certainly, and there's something about the needs of staff that are sort of asked to deliver this stuff. And you guys spoke about sustainability. You know, there's something about that's the feedback we've had from these provisions, is actually how do we help them do this work in an ongoing way? You know, they can have great pieces of training, but then staff leave or new challenges come. So yeah, our work has gone in quite a different direction.
James, do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I was just going to share that, you know, this type of learning has been absent from, you know, schools and training for so long that the vast majority of us as adults as well haven't spent that much time explicitly learning and developing these skills. And I think most people who would then be expected to deliver it would probably feel quite reticent, because they may not have done some of that own personal reflection themselves. And without, I suppose, consistent training and support and opportunities for reflection and also peer groups that you can work with to kind of share your experiences of going on that journey, it can be quite isolating and potentially quite scary. So I think support systems in place for practitioners who are delivering this kind of training is absolutely essential. So like reflective practice is one of the things that all of our practitioners will do every week, where they might be sharing different experiences of how they've delivered it and what the responses of the young people have been. So yeah, I think that's one thing that's really important.
Mark, is your point a different, is it a follow-on?
More of a follow-on, Caleb.
Okay, go. And I think, Lucy, you've got a point there, and Alicia will probably close that with you. But yeah, go.
Yes, I guess I wanted to kind of follow on, and you know, Rebecca is the person that we commissioned to do that work across sort of Kent and Medway, and I think there was learning for me as a commissioner about not trying to do to, you know, but to do with. As I kind of put in the chat, we learned the hard way from getting some very brief responses to our original offer, that if you co-design, you get a much stronger, better project that is running with that kind of active support of leaders. And it's that, Alicia, that was really interesting about you need that kind of whole school approach and as well as the individual's kind of staff skilled up to do that. And it was, I guess for me, it was a bit of it was a realization that actually, we will look to work with young people. We will look to kind of co-design with young people. We need to be thinking about and doing the same, if we're then offering particular projects, approaches, to a community like a school. And I don't think we do enough of that. It's Rebecca's project, and partly it is the skills that Rebecca brings, but it's had, sort of more vocal support than I think any other project that we've been able to kind of commission and deliver.
Mark, the really, really great experiential points there, and always good to see you as well, Mark. Lucy.
Yeah, again, we're just finishing, so it's probably not a good place, to finish. But I do think that the impact on staff that we lacked in Healthy Minds, and it's been a real struggle to try and do anything in that space with any type of rigor, the same level as the way perhaps we do with children and young people. But as everyone said, it makes such a difference. And James, I couldn't agree more. Unless the adults around children and young people are able to understand and model these behaviours themselves, you're a losing battle. And at the end of the day, we have an education system which is completely at odds with the social emotional development that we know that our children need, particularly in secondary schools, maybe not so much in primary schools, but particularly in secondary school. And unless we all start coming together and saying, we've got to think about what this means for the adults around children, I think we're just going to constantly keep going around. It is my opinion, we're just going to keep constantly going round and round in this circle. So more investment in research for adults would be my, plea.
Thank you, Lucy. Is getting a hand clap from Mark as well. Alicia, over to you.
Yeah, just to come back to Rebecca on just really interesting insights, Rebecca. It's really fantastic that you're doing that piece of work. And I suppose I come from a teaching background. I used to teach in a very deprived area in Dublin in Ireland. And when James spoke, he talked about relationships, and relationships underpin everything. And that is exactly what we saw, where we were teaching. It isn't about necessarily what you deliver. I think, James, to borrow your quote, but it's who delivers it, and developing that kind of trusted adult, the importance of that for our children, young people, in terms of social emotional development is just so critical. And I just think, Rebecca, it's great that you're doing that work. I think it's not to say that evidence-based interventions are not important. They are, but we do, for so long, we've invested heavily in those, and we need to kind of just balance the scale a bit more and look at, those that are delivering and just supporting their skills and confidence.
Excellent, Alicia. Thank you. So that brings us to the end of this virtual learning cafe. Please do take a moment to fill in our feedback form, and you'll have access to slides, which is super. We'd love to hear what you thought about it. Certainly the thing that came out for me is 1, conditions, 2, the importance of the implementation in the conditions, and 3, important to think about how this might be scalable. And if you're a youth sector organization on the call, this might be a space that you might want to start to go into. But I can hear from colleagues that it takes a while to get there in that regard as well. So a huge thank you to James, Alicia, and Lucy. Thanks so much for coming along and spending some time with us and giving us some nuggets that we can take away. And a huge thank you to you, each one of you, for attending and your contributions and questions at the end. It's fantastic. And this will now stay online. You'll be able to get onto it probably tomorrow or day after in that regard. So all the very best. It's Wednesday. Well, I won't see a lot of you for a little while. So happy weekends when they do come. Don't work too hard, but obviously make a difference at the same time. So that's from me, Caleb, and YEF. All the very best. Until next time.